Unsee the future.
Is it wet? The future might involve a boat. Do we do this, everybody? Right, let's do it. Hello and welcome to Unsee the Future, the Hopeychattybits with me, Timo Peach, a special edition thereof on this toasty Sunday afternoon here in the Northern Hemisphere, where it has, here in Bournemouth, in the middle of the south coast of the UK, where I'm coming from, it has finally stopped raining, at least for now. Nothing may ever be dry again, but had a little bit of autumn sunshine. It's actually a beautiful day. Welcome wherever you are in the world this afternoon or this morning, or catching up at whatever time you are on the video. You're very welcome. I do, of course, on this show love to meet artists, solar punks and change makers, reimagining the stories we think we're in. And today I've brought together 3 guests at once as part of Humber Eco Fest, which I shall be up at physically next weekend. It's a joy to be part of this. It's been running online for the last couple of weeks, right the way up to next Saturday, the 11th, when we're having a conference day on site. And it's been full of all kinds of different experiences of that particular city's response to eco-disaster, climate change, its story as it looks forward. Today, I'm talking to artists who are associated with East Yorkshire, who've had practices and experiences there and have a very particular relationship with nature in their practices. So who are my guests today? Firstly, it's Lauren Saunders. She's a multi-award-winning professional visual participatory artist, researcher and activist based in Hull. Inspired by environmental philosophy and supported by multidisciplinary research, she makes work in collaboration with both human and more than human communities to promote eco-literacy and radical compassion, kindness and kinship towards Earth. Also joining me is Monika Dutta. She's a cross-disciplinary artist and filmmaker. Her practice embraces the disciplines of moving image, photography, drawing, animation, sculpture, yarn and needlecraft, performance and activism. She's exhibited on an international scale and worked collaboratively to deliver works which collectively map relationships between the tangible natural environment, she says, and the constructed realities of a culture driven by technology. And also joining me is Jake Harries, currently engaged in participatory and media art as an independent practitioner and as co-director of Access Space Sheffield. His work explores ideas of openness in skills and knowledge sharing, focusing on sustainable alternatives to current models of relating to and using the environment, including food procurement, resource consumption, and the malleability of the urban environment. These are 3 people very engaged with lots of different ways of considering the stories that they think they're in and we all find ourselves in together. Would you please welcome to the show? Do a clap wherever you are. Just do a round of applause in your room. It is Lauren, it is Monika, and it is Jake. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
How are you this afternoon? Where in the world are each of you?
So I'm in Hull, which is East Yorkshire, just off the Humber River, and it's really nice here. It's nice and blue, nice blue crisp day. Yeah, it's all good. All good.
Lovely.
Here.
Monika, where are you?
I'm a few miles north of Lauren, maybe about 15, 20 miles north up the coast, up the Holderness coast, about a mile in from the sea, in the lovely middle of nowhere, where the sun has started shining. So good afternoon for us.
Good afternoon. And Jake, to complete the Eurovision entries, reporting in, where in the world are you?
I'm in Sheffield at the moment, but I'm coming over to Hull on Tuesday. I spend half of my time over there with Monika doing our art practice on a little piece of land.
Yes.
So yeah, it's actually a lovely day here, which is a hell of a contrast to last week. So
yes, I mean it has been blowing a hoolie, I think is the old-fashioned term. We've had sideways rain for days, and our mimosa tree in the front has been dancing. How have you related to the weather in the last few days? Do you enjoy different kinds of weather? Are you looking at it unavoidably ominously because now everything just feels like climate crisis? How have you related to the weather in the last couple of weeks, each of you?
I've been struck by how much warmer it feels at this time of year compared to previous years. So, for example, so Hull's got a really famous fair, Hull Fair.
Yeah.
And when I first moved to Hull, like 10, 11 years ago, I remember like wrapping up in like scarves and hats, and like Monika and Jake, you'll know as well, like scarves and hats, and you got proper wrap up because it's freezing. But like this year and like last year, it's almost like really light jacket weather. So I'm kind of a little bit, feel a bit weird about it being a bit warmer at this time of year. And that's kind of my sense of it. And it's weird because I feel guilty that I'm kind of enjoying that it's warm as well. You know?
You are speaking as an English person. Very clearly. I don't want to feel bad that we could we grow wine? We can go with that. It's not. It's a conflict. I feel the same. Jake, what about you and Monika together, because you're together most of the time. So how have you found this weather?
Well, we've been travelling actually. We went over in Wales last weekend for a music festival on the west coast and got buffeted terrifically. Terrific surfing weather, I suppose. But you know, it got wet several times and then we had to come back. So I mean, I think what's interesting about your question is it's not just about now. It's about like 10 years ago, and when really we started to feel it, we started to experience it kind of properly, I think, and it's just getting more so, you know. So I think this year with these storms have been extraordinary. I mean, and everybody's kind of felt it properly, you know. I don't think anybody's escaped this year, and it is warmer. It is warmer, yes, as well. So, yeah.
Now, each of you has a relationship with East Yorkshire and with Hull and the Humber region in different ways. Part of the reason for Humber EcoFest happening is because I think famously, I say famously, but it seems to be a well-told story in certain circles that Humber is, of course, that whole area, and Hull is facing a future that seems to be on the very front line of the climate crisis. There are these projections that Hull is going to be underwater sooner than most places in the UK, though a lot of this country is going to be, as projections stand. And that puts a fearsome sort of lack of future into people's minds. That's quite a story axis, isn't it? Monika, would you like to start us there on what your relationship is to that whole idea of where you living, not having a future, as some people would put it?
Well, I mentioned earlier a mile inland from the sea, and that's actually on the Holderness coast, which is Europe's. It is famously, if you're a geography student anywhere in Europe, it's Europe's fastest eroding coastline. And students,
what a badge of honour!
Students actually come here to do field studies, and it's used as a case study for various things that are happening, and particularly the acceleration due to what we're now calling climate emergency. But I first came here 17 years ago, and you know, I cycle with my little girl to the seaside to see the beach, and there was a road that we could cycle along from one little beach village to the next one up the coast, cycle along the road, really nice, lovely day out, whatever. The following summer, we went to do the same, and the road was gone. It was closed off, but we were able to walk along the field a little bit, and it literally looked as if a monster had taken bites out of the road, because that's how far back it had come, taking back the cliffs and even to the point of that coast road. It was only a little lane, so it was very close to the edge, but it just had massive semicircles bitten out of it. So that really shocked me, and that was when I started to do a bit of research and find out, you know, what's going on here. And I learned about how famous this coast particularly is. And we have watched it, and Jake has now witnessed the same year after year. Just massive chunks of the land disappear every single winter season. So you can go in the summer, you see the cliffs, the shape that they are, and then if you go back next spring after the autumn and the winter, it will have disappeared. And I think it goes at about 1 meter a year.
Wow.
Yeah. So and you can see meters, and there's caravan parks right up to the edge. So what happens is that annually they move the caravans, the front edge that's at the edge of the cliffs, they move them all the way back across the caravan park to the inland most part. So the caravan park is slowly sort of doing this and creeping inland. But you can see all the infrastructure. So when the cliff fall happens, there's electrical wires, there's water waste pipes, and all sorts of foundational supports, and they just hang out of the cliff. They're all over the beach. Slowly, over the course of the spring and the summer, they'll get taken into the sea, but a lot of them still hang out at the cliffs. And one thing that was very sad was that one year there was a rather large colony of sand martins in the cliff, and I was very excited about that. We went and visited them and watched them through the summer, and then of course in the winter that area of cliff had completely slumped and the whole colony area was gone. I hoped very hard that before that happened they'd already left, because of course, you know, they go at the end of every summer. But that's been the most striking thing for me.
And it is striking. You're painting a very graphic picture there, as I would imagine, as an artist and communicator. Jake, I'm wondering here, because you've watched much of that together with Monika, there's a theme, something I came to quite early on in waking up to environmental issues, is the underlying theme of grief, and how this relationship with Earth brings us back to our absence of having grief mechanisms in the robot world that we're all raised in. But for many of us, we're either calculating that in our heads academically from all the numbers from the IPCC, or there are those of us who are sort of a bit in denial because we don't see it every day. But what's it like? How do you process your relationship with place, living next to a really obvious falling away?
It's quite interesting. I mean, we kind of started a little piece of land because we're both into permaculture. We tried to build a permaculture at the back of the place where Monika is, and it got completely washed out in 2012 because we had massive storms. And so we looked at what was growing, and it turned out to be the weeds. So we started to look at those instead. Now, so there's this kind of like it's quite interesting the way that we live now, because a little piece of land is surrounded by industrial farmland, the big basket of England that sweeps down the east coast all the way to East Anglia from further up north. And the crops, in contrast to the weeds, have a very narrow band of what would you call it? Comfortable growing. Tolerance, comfortable growing. Whereas the weeds are much more flexible. They don't mind. They don't mind if it's too wet. They don't mind if it's too cold, too hot.
Bring it on!
Totally resilient. Totally resilient. So, and they have natural pest control, because I mean, on our land there, we've got we don't do any kind of intervention in terms of killing insects. Insects just deal with everything. Whereas next door, the land floods. We never flood. The land floods because it's got kind of just bare earth, and of course the earth is blowing away. It was calculated, wasn't there, that there's now 50 years left soil before we have to totally rethink the way we grow.
Yes.
So what really got us into this was a little video that I saw on YouTube called Farming the Future, I think it was called, or Future of Farming, where they
Farms
were
for the
looking
future.
Farms for the Future. That's right. It was just a little survey by somebody who was looking at various ways that people could improve what's here now, and it was things like having different kinds of grass so that cattle don't make great big pools of mud, and permaculture, 5-layer permaculture, where the wheat that we have in virtually every food that we eat is replaced with edible sweet chestnuts, because that's the carbohydrate. Now, you're talking about grief here. We're looking at alternatives so that grief isn't so strong. It's kind of like, well, once you learn that actually there's a lot out there, wild food, that will still be around, whether there's climate change or not, and it's edible, we start just thinking, well, we can survive. A lot of the fear, I guess, is to do with resources, to do with food, to do with all the kinds of things that we are naturally being sold.
Yes, naturally being sold. That's a good
naturally
phrase.
being sold and take for granted. So we don't take those things for granted so much, because once we start down this path, you start to question everything. Now, there's no denial that the water levels are going to rise, but it's not the first time it's happened. I mean, if you look out at the eroding coast, out on the Holderness coast, 8,000 years ago, there would have been land as far as the horizon, perhaps. And so when the ice was melting, the inhabitants of the whole of the world would have on the coast would have experienced climate change in a very dramatic manner. But not as dramatic as this one, perhaps.
It's the time, isn't it? It's the speed at which things are happening, geologically speaking, in Earth terms. For us, it's like watching a slow motion collapse if we're not aware of it. But it's not slow motion at all in Earth terms. It's like blink of an eye, we've gone to the carbon red lines. Now, I showed a couple of images just now on the video of views from various rooms of yours, and this typifies one of your views, doesn't it? This is a wide angle shot of. Is that from your kitchen?
That is the view from the kitchen window, yes.
So you have really opened up your relationship to the wild there. You get to see what the landscape wants to do without help.
That's what we affectionately call the back garden.
So that is a major source of food for us. Just the wild things. There's a lot of hogweed there. There's cow parsley, dandelions, nettles, and also, we haven't found a way of eating grass yet.
That's not going to sell our ecological credentials to your friends, is it? When it gets to the grass eating stage. But by contrast, here's just one shot for those watching of abundance from the garden, yielding the way you turn that we've just seen, that seems wild, into food. That all looks delicious. Describe what we're looking at here.
Apart from the little bunch of white in the centre, that is all dandelion.
Right.
Everything there comes from the dandelion plant. So there's the large bowl of sort of straw-looking stuff. That's the petals removed from the flowers, and they will be used to make kind of veggie burger sort of type food. But also I put them into baked goods because we're gluten-free, and they actually provide a really good binder for gluten-free baking. Steeping in the saucepan are dandelion flower heads for making wine. There's just a couple of bottles of wine up at the back there. Centre bowl, lots of green, weird looking things. That's actually the flower buds, which I pickle, lacto ferment into a kind of caper-like substitute.
Ooh.
And then down the front is a cake, which is baked with the petals. So all that just comes from dandelions.
Now, Lauren, I'm going to ask you, because you know these two, have you had some of their dandelion cuisine?
I don't know what was that hairy cake you brought to that? That was amazing.
Lauren sampled a bread that was actually made with what for us is a bit like a dandelion substitute. It's a plant in this area. It's commonly known as sow thistle. Its Latin name is Sonchus. But the thing is, it comes after the dandelions. So that we have the dandelions through from, say, March, April to maybe May, June, but then they're all gone. But then the Sonchus will come up and provide a very similar material. It is a related plant, and it will provide similar food material from about July. Well, now this relates to what Lauren was saying earlier. Ordinarily, the Sonchus would finish at the end of August. I picked some last week, and that is because of the ridiculously warm temperature that we keep having.
Yeah.
So Lauren has had hairy bread made with.
Bread was good, and that you made like rosehip jam or rosehip sauce or something last. Was it last year when we did the residency at Harries?
Rosehip ketchup.
That was it. That's really good as well.
Yeah.
So how do
my
you?
favorite,
Your favorite is. So how do you three know each other as artists, as friends, as people relating to the land?
So me and Monika we shared a residency at this arts place in Hull called the Hull Artist Research Initiative. And it's run by a mutual friend of ours called Sarah Pennington and supported by Tom Robinson. And we just sort of shared time, didn't we? We kind of met through that and then kind of got to know each other a bit more. And then we're both on this arts and activist program now called Union, which is amazing, isn't it, Monika? It's really, really good. Yeah, we do. And then I met Jake a couple of weeks ago in, where was we? Sheffield.
Yeah, it was your union get-together.
Weeks ago. Yeah. So that's how we sort of know each other.
Now, between us, we represent a couple of different generations, all facing the same things, all trying to relate to it. Lauren, how do you relate to this idea where the three of us will have grown up understanding what The Good Life was, the program on the BBC? From your point of view, starting out earlier on, how are you relating to looking at the cliff erode and sensing the sea coming to get you? How are you turning that in your mind, in your practice, into a relationship that isn't just panic?
That's quite a good question. So for context, so I wasn't kind of brought up as a kind of outdoorsy kid or anything. So I grew up in London, and I wasn't allowed out to play because there were like drug dealers down the street. It was just a bit rough, and I weren't allowed out. Weren't allowed out to go on my bike without only up to that bush on the pavement, so my granddad could see me, so I could cycle back again. So like I wasn't by any stretch of the imagination, I wasn't like an outdoorsy kid who knew what flowers were, or plants were, or knew anything at all. So I've kind of come to it later on, and at that same time as coming to it and starting to appreciate the world around me, at that same time it's also been like, oh dear, things aren't very good, because obviously you want to learn and you read and you read books and you learn stuff. But yeah, so I haven't kind of had that thing of, oh, look how lovely everything is and how beautiful it is, without there also being that, oh dear, it's all going to go quite quickly.
Yeah,
it's all
exactly.
going to go wrong.
Your whole relationship with nature and discovering it. Oh, it's out there. But maybe not for long.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's a lot to try and process. And surely your art and your practice, your creative practice, is the way you've made relationship with that.
Yeah. So I think, and I've sort of been saying it a bit more recently, that I think my practice does have this kind of prepper kind of element to it.
Interesting.
So, and I see like what Monika and Jake do as well, as sort of being like prepper, like learning how to live with the land and being that sort of self-sufficient thing.
Yeah.
And for me, it feels quite similar of well, if it is all going to go wrong and it is all going to go belly up, then we need to have that relationship, and we need to know what to do when there is this inevitable ecological collapse that's going to happen at a tipping point. And I think that, it is hard and it is panic inducing, but what other option is there to actually try and respond to it?
There is. I find it interesting that each of you are making relationship with nature by trying things, by letting things grow, by taking a different approach to living next to it, part of it, listening to it. But also, of course, for all of us as artists, there's a huge storytelling issue here about how we interpret the way we feel about these things, but also about other futures that we see. Jake, can you talk me through a little bit of your creative practice and how you've approached the story that we think we're in, with nature and the climate emergency?
Yeah. Firstly, I think it's very difficult for people to articulate their anxiety about this. I think I did an exhibition in Sheffield a few years ago where I asked people to do stuff about the environment, and I think that people were either reticent. I mean, it was kind of not sponsored by, but it was in collaboration with XR, and they put up one of the, on the side of our building, one of those ladies, the red ladies, a kind of a painting of it. But I think that kind of action is one way that people do things, but actually doing visual art can be really, really tough. What do you say about this? What is a painting of a flower gonna say something about it? I don't think so. It's much deeper than that. And what Monika and I have kind of come to do is to give people food, to bring people together, to kind of like explain about the world, the land, if you like, through natural things like eating, and people being together, because we're going to have to do this. We are together doing this. It's something that none of us can avoid. Not even billionaires who've got themselves a place in New Zealand. They can't avoid it. There are going to be supply chains that are going to be disrupted, and
Do you think?
They're not going to be able to go out with a helicopter and just get anything they want anymore. So it's kind of like we're stuck here, and there's this kind of strange friction between, the super rich and just everyone else. And there are very few of them, and there's a whole lot of us. And we in the UK are much better off than, say, 50% of the world will be. There are some people who are now having to move home. Already there are islands where people are trying to find political solutions, move away from where they are. It's happening. The kind of temperature rises are going to mean all kinds of stuff. It's for people just generally trying to live. So it's a very, very difficult thing to get your head around. And the kind of political solutions that have come across so far don't seem to be articulating what people think and feel. And I think that art needs to kind of get people together to talk about this, to create a kind of togetherness, if you like, so that we are all talking about this and knowing that we are all thinking this. And it's kind of like maybe we can find solutions through talking, being together, trying to find, rather than listening to politicians who don't seem to be
relationship. You're talking about relationship really, and building those. In considering chatting to the three of you together today, I wrote an article on my Friday article. I was considering how we contrast the place of outrage within us, contrast that with the place of creation within us. Monika, how do you leap between the activist you and the artist you? Do you think of the relationship between those two responses?
I think ultimately they are the same.
Interesting.
I don't really think of them as two different aspects of myself. I think as an artist, I've always been a little bit arsey. always been a little bit disruptive. And I think that's because I've also always been involved in some form of kind of protest and activism.
Yeah.
So the art that I produce, I try to sort of put that in service of that, if possible. But what I've found in the sort of current configuration of how Jake and I have sort of developed a way of working, giving things away makes me feel like I'm doing something useful. And I think that's, Jake talked about how we give people food, and we create events where people can come together and they can share, and we are sharing with them. And I know that this is something that's close to Lauren's heart as well. We seem to have come so far as a society, we've come so far away from kind of communal, cooperative mindsets. And the idea of care, we now have to actually make an effort to have care in place in the structures that we work through. So I think the act of sharing and actually giving things to people without asking for anything back, whether that be even a bartering system, even if you remove money and you just want to exchange, the idea of not wanting anything back, but just sharing what you are able to share, is actually nowadays quite a radical thing to do, which makes me quite sad, really. But the fact that I can do it, and that Jake and I have built kind of artistic frameworks where we can do that, that makes me feel a lot more useful. It makes me happy that I can do that.
It's like when we try to give something to somebody, they always ask how much is it, and it's really strange that you do. Like Monika said, we've done several of these things last year, and all the time people saying how much is it, and it's like the systems that are in place at the moment just ingrain in you that things have a monetary value, and that is going to have to change, because we can't just carry on like this. There are things which the values, if we're going to get through this together, the values are going to have to shift significantly, I think. And this is also where Monika and I are from, trying to look at how consumerism can be countered in a small way, just ourselves, but at least we talk to a lot of people about it when we do our events and give them things for free. So
this is all a power struggle, and not just the power running to my internet connection, apparently, but also I was thinking of the great difference between all the conflicts we see on the news at the moment and what eruptions of old power they all are, contrasting with the way that each of you relates to nature and is looking to build relationship with it.
Yeah,
I have a thought on that relationship between like what is art and activism as well, about how, for me, I think that the act of creation in itself is something that challenges the status quo.
It does, Lauren.
Doesn't it?
It does.
So you can have things staying as they are, or you can create something, and that automatically changes the pattern or the flux or whatever. It challenges the status quo. So I don't think that they can necessarily, philosophically at least, be separated. And I've also got this thing in my head about like art doesn't have to be, talking about a picture of a flower, can that kind of change anything? And I think for me, you can paint a picture of a garden, or you can spend that time and that energy and that resource to actually create a garden. So for me, it's always about like doing the tools that actually do the thing, rather than just a pretty representation of it. And I think that's really important. Like now, we don't live in the privilege of however long ago you know, to be able to do pretty representational pictures, because well, we kind of need to act now. We've kind of moved past that, I think. Not to say there isn't a place for it, but yeah, for me, resources should be spent as tools. Art is a tool, really, isn't it? So
it is, and you're illustrating that sort of misunderstanding people have whenever we talk about art, and even in the back of our heads, sometimes it can, that old habits are there. That art is something kind of representational or decoration.
Pretty.
Just pretty, but actually it is an act. It's an embodiment. It's a moving into something, and that's what each of you are doing. Lauren, I'm interested. Intention. I love that word. I'm interested in your practice and how you would describe the work that you're currently exploring.
Now you're asking. So I'm really interested in like the relationships that we have with, I say we as humans, have with the non-human or more than human world.
Yeah.
And that's not like, I'm not recognizing that we are nature, we are a facet of nature. So like, I don't like the distinction anyway, but that's the language we've got to use.
Yes.
How we develop that kinship. And it's all rooted in like these sort of philosophical ideas of like kinship ethics and land ethics, and this idea, which is basically if we can develop that relationship and that community and expand our definition of community to include the more than human world, then I don't know, we can relate to it and we care more, like we give more of a shit really. And then because we have that care, like worrying about the dandelion outside just as much as we might care about the suffering of a family member, then we're more likely to act. So it's just that idea of caring equals or leads to moral duty, which leads to moral action. So that's the kind of thing that I'm really interested in. And like, there's something about how do we develop that community and that relationship where I think art is really helpful in centering the creative agency and like the voice of the more than human to help us just to relate to it a little bit more. So that we can develop that love and that care, as cheesy as that sounds.
It's not cheesy. Love is a verb, mate. Love is something you do. Care is a verb. We have a piece of yours for those of us watching, and there's one of your pieces here on screen. Can you describe this? I find like things that like processes, natural processes and things that we overlook really interesting. So this is like an evaporation drawing, which is essentially the idea of getting a piece of paper or surface or whatever, putting it in like a shallow tub of water, and then I made some charcoal, handmade charcoal, crushed it up so it's like a powder, sprinkled it on the water surface, and as the water's evaporated, the charcoal dust kind of settles and fixes itself. And what I like about this, it's like a process of evaporation, which we overlook a lot, but is a really, really interesting natural process that happens. But also I like the idea that the water has decided where to place the charcoal, the pigment. So it's almost like the water's made the drawing, which I really, really like. And then the orange around the edge is just like the rust, which obviously is another process. I used like an old loaf tin for that one. And then it just got really rusty because of that chemical reaction, again, which I think is just a really interesting thing that we overlook, but the colours are beautiful. Yeah. So, oh, that's lovely.
That's what that is.
I've got another piece here.
So this one is a collaboration with Earth. And this essentially is, I did a drawing of like a pine cone thing. It was a single line drawing, a contour drawing it's called, where it's just you don't take your pen off the paper, because I just like to draw like that. And then I folded it up and then I buried it for 9 weeks. And really it's just a kind of an invitation to the earth to, hey, do something to this piece of paper and like make art with me. And then like I kind of told that piece of ground, I know how this sounds, but I told that piece of ground like what I was asking of it and how long I would leave it in there for. So that, because I think there has to be this kind of ethical relationship we can't just expect or exploit, but that's another little topic. But yeah, this one, so I buried it for 9 weeks and then took it out, and that's kind of what the earth did. So it's just a collaboration between us two, really.
That must have been a ceremonial moment when you you knew the morning had come round. 9 weeks later, you were going out. Did you just go and dig it out, or did you have quite a moment? Did you sit with the earth for a while? How did you relate to digging this up, and what did you think? When you first unfolded it, what did you think?
So it was 9 weeks and 2 days, because I sort of forgot. It wasn't ceremony. It wasn't like a big thing.
Because ceremony.
Yeah. So there's always this like idea to have this like beautiful ceremony and intention with me, but the reality is it's just like, oh crap, I need to get that out of the ground. I better do it now. And it was like getting dark, and then just kind of, I don't know, just kind of going up, and then just had like a plant pot on top of it, so I knew where it was. It was just kind of a process of moving that and then just digging really slowly. So there wasn't this whole kind of built up ceremony around it, but like that process of digging under was like, it felt like it did feel like a sharing moment of a handing over, like a relay kind of feeling. Which was quite nice. But relay, and then like it was really, really soggy and wet, as you can imagine. And then being like, right, how am I going to unfold this? I didn't think this through. Because it was just completely stuck. So it was like trying to peel it apart, and then it's all like starting to fall. I'm like, okay, no, I've got to leave it to dry for a bit. So yeah, I just left it out on the kitchen for a bit to dry out, and then just kind of peeled it back. And then there's all these like little bitty bits, and then just taking photographs to try to remember that bit connected to that little bit of edge and that edge. And then when it was all dried out, that's when I stuck it down and tried to approximate where all these little bits had kind of come off from. So it was really nice.
A relay. I like that. And that you're describing the experience of collaboration, aren't you? When you sort of hand it over to somebody else, and if I'm working on a mix with somebody else, what are they going to add to it when I hear it back? It becomes more than the sum of its parts almost instantly.
Yeah.
Monika, what's your sense of relaying or participating with nature?
Well, before I say that, I just want to say to Lauren, what you've just described really makes me think of squirrels. When you were describing digging it up, it's like you squirrel going back to your acorns and finding out if they've worked. So that's quite nice.
Interesting. I like that.
Yeah.
My experience of collaborating with nature, I think ultimately, although the idea with a little piece of land is minimum intervention and passive rewilding, as it's called, I am actually a bit of a gardener. I'm a secret gardener, and I do love having relationships with plants, which sounds a bit strange, but I kind of
it doesn't at all.
I kind of get to know them, and I might sound like a bit of a nutter, but they have personalities and everything. So I think, I do sound like a nutter, because all the plants outside over the years, they've become my friends. And Jake will actually vouch for this. I do actually go and talk to them, not in a sort of ceremonial way, but just as a matter of fact, when I'm out and about outside, I'll just pass a comment to a particular plant or whatever on how it might be behaving, because sometimes they behave quite badly. But
badly by whose standards, Monika? That's the question.
The other plants.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Some of them can be quite antisocial at times.
We have a climbing rose out the front that is a full-on bastard. It's trying. We're in a full fight. We've got our boundaries, and it's completely taken over the bush that's in there. It's So
we've actually discovered that pendulous sedge is rather boisterous.
Okay.
It appears to be very delicate, but it's not. It's a very boisterous plant.
Sneaky, Jake is shaking his head sagely here. He's had a run in with it.
He'll grow. It's just really colonial. He just wants to go everywhere, and you can't. It won't decay. You can't stick it on the compost. It's got full of this thing called silica, which lasts forever. And we were in Botanical Gardens actually in Sheffield a few weeks ago, and we saw this plant, and it's called New Zealand flax, and it's got these leaves. And we thought, hang on a minute, that looks just like sedge. So we're going to get our own back, and we're going to try and make textiles out of it. And because it's so it won't
durable.
decay. Yeah, it won't go away. I mean, if you put a pile of leaves in the corner, right, of the drive or something, and you come back next year, they'll all be decay. We put sedge there, it'll be the same. It might
Yeah.
dry out a bit, but it won't. So what you have to do is, like, these plants that aren't behaving themselves, you have to try and find ways to make them your friends.
What we're saying is relationships are hard because there's give and take, and everyone needs boundaries.
Yes, it's about living with stuff. I mean, this is
living with stuff
rather than clamping down on it and like dominating it, which is what people do. It's living with it, and the same with the animals. I mean, it's kind of like there's lots of wild animals around us, and we don't try and interfere with them because actually they do a lot of good, and they have their own system. So
you're talking, all of you, about listening properly, which is fundamental permaculture stuff. It's spending time, dialing out the noise, paying attention. That's really all you're talking about. That's how relationships start. When you pay attention to somebody, to something, to another entity, then you get to know how to work with them.
I think it's to do with just believing that you're on equal footing. Because, okay, so there are those of us who aren't very good listeners, but generally speaking, in the realm of human to human, we do listen. We pay attention to other people. We listen to humans, but we don't think that plants or animals sort of have anything for us to listen to. But if you put yourself in the same place as all other living things, then it becomes much easier to enter that process of sort of it's not even listening, actually. It's more in a way it's a little bit more sinister than that. It's more of a kind of survival mechanism, really, because if you do consider yourself as kind of down with nature, then actually you become quite vulnerable. So you need to know how to look after yourself, and you need to know how everything around you is going to behave. If you don't imagine that you can just flatten everything and kill everything and be on top, if you are going to sustain other living things around you, you do need to know how to behave around them so that they're not threatening you in any way or causing you problems.
No one I've ever heard who has a more indigenous relationship with land, with place, ever treats it as something romantic. It's not like gardening to them. It's respect, paying attention for respect, and then everybody can get along fine. But you have got to know your boundaries. You do make me think there, Monika, of a beautiful phrase I have in mind by Dr. James Burke, who used to be on the telly when many of us were younger. He's got this phrase from much more recently as an older chap, a vision of the future. He just describes Earth in a more hopeful future as a planet of gardens and jungles, where we have, partly from his point of view, through technology, used in a more subservient way, we've allowed most of Earth to rewild in different ways. But we as humans still need that sort of much more up-close relationship, and the artistic relationship, in fact, with nature, where we still want to garden and nurture and make different styles. Informal gardening isn't everybody's taste. There are different ways to plant and to enjoy things. So I like that idea of the intentional kind of relationship in the right place, and in others, just not feeling threatened to let nature be its own way.
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, the kind of hunter-gatherer way of behaving with your environment is very much being part of it. You can destroy it, and it will destroy you by not being there if you're bad, if you don't nurture it. And it's kind of like it's very hard to do this in civilization, because your default position is dominance. And it's kind of hard to explain to people about why you shouldn't dominate, because that's what farming is. It's dominating the land, dominating plants, dominating insects, dominating animals. Letting, like Monika was talking about, the lack of intervention, trying to do that it's actually quite difficult because you're always wanting to intervene. And yet, if you look at indigenous populations who are still living in a kind of semi-hunter-gatherer or hunter-gatherer way, they intervene very, very gently, just for the benefit to keep it sustaining generation after generation. And sometimes they don't seem to have changed anything for thousands of years because it works.
Yes, and an obvious reference there would be back before the experiences of indigenous clans in Australia, before the white folk turned up in buckled shoes. That when Captain Cook supposedly turned up on the south of the island there, he didn't think anybody lived there humanly, because so transparent was their footprint with nature. He just didn't think anybody was there. And that's like the greatest testimony to our instinct to dominate. That we can't comprehend that there's another way. We'll say things like, there's a jungle out there. And that goes hand in hand with the word dominance and the idea of total ownership, which is the real war that we're all caught in, to use a violent word. The war we're in is that one, how to move from the demand for total ownership into total relationship. Yeah.
I mean, there's I've got a book called Dark Emu, which is about Australia, and there's actually a lot of it from notes of the colonizers. But there's one particular one that really struck me was some white farmers went out and they were tilling the soil, and in the night the indigenous population would go back to the soil and try and change it back to the way it was, because they'd been growing things on it for hundreds, thousands of years, and now the Europeans turn up with a plough, and the indigenous people knew that within a few days that soil would be blown away. And it's like the kind of imposing these kind of very dominating tactics onto the land. It's very easy to destroy it.
Yeah.
So,
you're making me think here, actually, Jake, that there's a I don't know how we all feel about this, but I've been thinking more lately about how my relationship with land, my relationship with my indigenous ancestry is so sort of scratched away. I've never thought about it until more recent years, where I'm now reappraising my relationship with land and place, the land we choose, the land we're raised in. And white sort of post-Celtic groups, white people don't have a relationship that's indigenous. We've got layers to excavate back and try and work out from the most basic sense. What is our relationship with land, with nature? What are our indigenous roots? There's a huge bit of healing and reverse engineering in our imaginations to do there, right? Do you feel that your work in any way is helping others and yourself explore that kind of thing? How do you feel?
Well, I would hope so. I mean, I grew up in the country, right? In the country.
Yeah.
But since I think it was a couple of years into doing a little piece of land, I realized that though I lived in a tiny village on the coast surrounded by farmland, my experience could have been that of being growing up in London. My relationship with food, my relationship with supply chains, with consumerism, it was all the same. And so doing this has been very special in that it has shown me quite late in life how it can change and how it should change. But the issues are for most people that they grow, they walk out the door and it's concrete and it's asphalt.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to get contact, and going into the country and looking at farmland isn't the way to do it either, because that's it's an extension of industrial society, if you like.
It is.
It's sort of like, so the kind of way we need to think about it is it's quite hard to get to, I think.
Yeah,
and
it is.
That's kind of like the major obstacle to asking people to kind of think differently, I suppose, because it's hard to imagine it.
It's a generational work we're engaged in. We really are only just beginning to trim tab. And when we might all joke about the 1970s, my childhood, so much eco thinking was put in place in the mainstream, but a whole generation, my entire half century of life, has gone by without that looking like it's being adopted and taking off. So we've got many generations of us lot trying to help younger generations reteaching basics about the land and who we are, and a much, much longer history beyond the 500 years of this set of economics, or even the 10,000 years of civilization, as we call it, inverted commas. I was going to come to you, Lauren, because you, of course, grew up in, I think it's Tottenham, right? So it's as asphalt as it gets.
Yeah,
Enfield, right?
Yeah.
So you've been on a journey. You've dug through the tarmac, right?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. So I only really came to it. Well, I knew about it, obviously, environmental stuff. And when I was in secondary school, I think it was like year 10, and I started an environmental club, which no one else turned up to. But I was really keen to let's recycle all the paper that we're doing and stuff like that. And then I was aware of it, but didn't really I cared. It's like a similar thing, isn't it? Like you care and you want to do something, but you're so just part of the world, that you just carry on life. And then it was about 5-6 years ago. I think when I told you before, Tim, I'd sort of noticed this bird that seemed to be really suffering and struggling in winter, pecking, trying to find food and stuff, and that emotional impact it had on me. I was like, oh my God, I want to start, how can I help this bird? Was what it started off with, and it kind of went on this chain reaction of just learning more and more and more and more and being like, oh God. And then it's just kind of evolved over time, and then only moved house the day of lockdown, and that was the first time in my adult life that we had an outdoor space that I could kind of learn to grow and just have that relationship in my own front garden, literally. So yeah, it was kind of a process.
It definitely
really
is, and that's an artistic process partly too, because you've embodied it, you've explored, you've gotten out, you've changed your feelings by being in physical relationship to following a hunch, experimenting, practicing. That's part of, this is how I think artists can teach us all how to engage and grow. You've supplied me a short film. It's a piece of yours. If you know the one, can you explain a bit about what we might watch here for a moment?
Which one? Because I sent you a couple.
Oh, did you? There's a piece that's a close up of the ground with your feet moving through.
That one. Yes, that's called April Trace Walk, and the purpose of this was this idea of seeing if there was a way to invite the earth to collaborate on some sort of growing thing. So I had these black socks. You see, it's just walking up and down this line. And the idea was to build on this tradition in art of walking. Don't ask me to name artists because my memory is crap, but
it doesn't matter.
There's lots of artists that tend to walk up and down space or walk across. Sorry,
that's all right. You have been, Lauren has been. You've been recovering from the lurgy, haven't you? Oh, you poor thing. She's had to mute. I am going to play the film while Lauren has a cough splutting fit. So yeah, let's watch this.
The idea of that one was to build on that walking tradition of walking up and down a space. And the black socks that I had on, in theory, the idea was that as I walked along this space, it would pick up seeds or moss or algae or something as I'm walking and leave and stay on the sock. And when I put those socks into a little, again, it's not ideal, but a little plastic a sandwich bag.
Yes.
And in theory, I was hoping that it would kind of, things would start growing off this interaction. So it's almost like the socks became an interface for a conversation, is what it felt like. But nothing kind of grew off it. And what I realised afterwards is that I kind of did it at the wrong time of year. So I did it in April, when really I should have been doing it in like September time, when there's more seeds and more things and spores flying about everywhere. So I've always had the intention to like redo it, but I just kind of haven't got around to that yet.
Interesting though, that even just for that less than a minute clip, the sense of being up close, down a ground level low, and slowness. All of you, in a sense, all of you are bringing the word activist, including Merlin behind you there. Merlin the dog is with Lauren. Yeah, that word activist seems always full of the word urgency. We must act now. The IPC data we all have about climate just seems so incredibly urgent. But getting back to nature is the opposite. It's about long, deep time and slowness. Monika, how do you reconcile that?
I think that's something I've learned from Alan, actually, from Alan Raw, our Humberfest instigator.
Yes.
Because Alan very much framed the fest and his sort of take with sustainability and beyond, removing that word crisis. Well, first of all, removing crisis, climate crisis, get rid of crisis, remove the word emergency. We don't want to think of climate emergency. And so Alan talks about climate positive behaviour, and that immediately shifts how you can feel about the situation that we're in. So I think that, we, as a population, the media really haven't helped us by using this phraseology, talking about crisis and emergency. It does make you feel hopeless, actually.
Yeah, it does.
Because it is all so urgent, and we are running out of time. Then there's actually no point in doing anything, is there? Because nothing's going to make any difference.
Yeah.
So I've made a sort of calculated effort now to remove those two phrases from my rhetoric and to talk instead about climate positive behaviour, because that tends to stress what I've always been most interested in, which is behavioural change. There's a huge investment in our society in technological solutions. We think that we are going to invent the answer to this issue that we're facing. I don't think we need to invent it. I think we just need to change our behaviour individually and collectively. So talking about climate positive behaviour is kind of like a perfect phrase for how I feel about what's going on, really.
Yeah, that's lovely.
I feel not the opposite, but I think that using words like emergency and crisis are kind of important as well. Like, I think, we know that fear is the biggest motivator for humans anyway. So that is going to connect to some people. But I think to think that like climate hope and positivity is diametrically opposed to fear. I don't think that it has to be and or. I think we can use both, depending on the context. So I'm going to have a coughing fit again. Sorry.
Oh, you're making such a good point. Yeah, I do feel that not having and or. I know from my own point of view, I've been considering this week that when the media cycle triggers me to anger and triggers the justice thing, which is really what's going on in everyone when they're angry, even if they're angry about something that we might thoroughly disagree with. What's usually going on is some nugget of sense of justice or injustice rather going on in somebody, and how to put that together with something that then feels responsive. And I simply had to come back to my experience as a creative. When I'm in the place of creation, I don't worry about, am I being responsive? What am I doing that's any good? How am I helping? I'm just in that zone and feeling alive and feeling part of life when I'm in the inspiration flow. Jake, do we all feel that? Is that something we can relate to as artists? I would hope so.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's interesting, this time issue and the kind of like the idea of emergency. You've got to deal with it now, and then there's the kind of more positive thing, which is the longer stretching thing. I mean, what we're trying to learn or relearn is stuff that we lost hundreds of years ago, maybe thousands. I don't. It's kind of like, so it's going to take time. And when I tell people that Monika and I have been doing this since 2010, really doing it since 2012, they go, "Oh my God, that's 11 years!" What do you, And we're kind of like expect like a room full of stuff, rooms and websites and blah 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 to show for it. The truth is that it takes time. You've got to engage with it at its own speed, and the yearly cycles that we deal with. I don't know when I started to really understand and become realize I was not immune to them anymore, which is what living in a city, the supermarket, and all the rest of it does, apart from the weather changing. But it's like this stuff to do with food, to do with animals, to do with whatever. It's kind of like, it does take time. And again, we're insulated from all of this stuff by how we live. And so there, I think Lauren's got a really good point. There are two kind of different time things. There's, what can we do? Emergency, we have to do something now, but then we have to do the long thing too. Within that, there's a way of mediating, our work, and sort of being angry and not angry. So trying to be angry about the situation and also being positive about it. So there's this sort of like, you've got to be positive if you think you're going to live longer and the world's going to continue and people are still going to be here. You've got to be positive, but you've got to do something now as well. And so it's kind of like a multi-channel process, if you like.
You've summed up much there, I think, Jake, and my feeling too is that our job, actually, everyone, not just those of us who are really conscious of this, but in the media age we're in, we're all being called to grow up in a particular way. And I think it's the capacity to pull focus constantly, and not crazily, intentionally, but to be able to zoom out to the macro and the long time and the slowness and down at ground level, and being able to jump into first responder mode as we need to. And I think our lives are meant to be intelligently pulling focus a lot between the I'm angry, I'm chilled, I can do something, I have no control. There's a healthy kind of breathing in and out there, I think, for us as artists, especially to try and lead on.
Yeah. I mean, people can do this. We can do it. We can respond to crisis and relax. I mean, that's, that makes for an interesting life.
Yes,
it's not boring.
It's not boring.
It's probably very healthy for your mind. I mean, it's like not being bored.
No, exactly right.
So
yes,
I agree with you completely. There,
I wonder how each of you might wish to sum up our time together here. If there's a thing that you would like to point people at, yes, there's where they can find your work. I want people to go and find your websites, read up on the work you've been doing. There's so much interesting stuff between all three of you. Monika, I'll come to you first. What's the last thing you'd like to share or leave people with this afternoon?
I'm not sure, actually, but one thing I have noticed while we've been talking about time and different time scales, I've actually just noticed, staring at my screen, apart from Jake, who I know has electric light, all three of us have over the course of the hour, very, very slowly and gently, we've had this dimming in the spaces that we're in. And yeah, I just thought that for me, that kind of echoed what we've been talking about with time. It's this, it's invisible, but if you look, it's actually quite marked. You can see it quite clearly if you look. It's actually quite remarkable. So I think, again, that echoes what we have just talked about with regards to, is it an emergency? Will it take longer? What sort of zooming in and out? What is the scale that we're actually working with?
Yeah, that's lovely. Thank you. And where can we find your work in particular?
Well, I think Jake actually has our website there as his name, alittlepieceofland.org.uk. So that's our collaborative practice. I've also got a solo practice, and you can find a little kind of archive of previous work through the years at foggedfilm.org. So that's all joined together, Fogged Film.
Fogged Film. We'll stick that in the notes afterwards. Thank you very much indeed, Monika. Jake, what's your sort of thought from our chat this afternoon? What would you like to leave people with?
I really enjoyed this chat because it made me feel very positive that there are people who want to find a way to mediate ways of doing things to the public, if you like, and change things, change the way people behave, and aren't afraid to look back, but also aren't afraid to look to the future. And so it's this like long time. I think we should think about ourselves living in a long timeline, way back and way into the future. And we don't know how we're going to think in the future, and we certainly don't know the way people thought in the past. We just know now. But we do know that everybody was living in the past, and we've got to live in the future. So there's kind of like we should listen to the past if we can, and listen to the now, listen to the earth, and listen to everybody who's concerned, and try to work out what we can do as individuals and collectively. And that's kind of for me, that's what our work is about, I think, and we'll try and continue to do that.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. And so, Laura, I come to you. Where can people find out more about you? But what's your overriding thought that you'd most like to leave somebody with today?
I've really enjoyed chatting as well, but apart from my coughing fits, but I've really enjoyed our chat. So I think like the thing that I think is always really useful just to think about and do is sometimes we're never really sure what we're supposed to do or what the best thing to do is, and sometimes we can feel really paralyzed about everything. But at the end of the day, everything comes down to like compassion and care, and just extending that care and compassion we have for our family and extending that outward to the rest of the world. So I think there's something around like, even if you're not sure what to do, just always do the kindest thing. Just always do the most caring thing, careful thing. And I think that is something that everybody knows how to do. Even like 3-year-olds know, what it is to be nice to somebody else. They might have to be taught it, but they do know what kindness is. So I think that's important. An important takeaway is that, just be nice.
What that really means, the value that really is. It's not a silly thing, it's a deeply understood thing.
Yeah, we were quite flippant with like ideas of care and love, and it's all that hippie shit. But it's true. Like it's really important that we do extend that kindness and care. In terms of like finding me, so I have a website which is laurensaundersart.co.uk. I'm on Instagram quite a bit, which is @lsaundersart. And also on a signpost as well to another project, a sort of co-run called The Critical Fish, which is criticalfish.co.uk. And what that is, it's like a journal come magazine come project come collective, whatever it is. And it's about making thinking and writing about visual art and culture more accessible while still being really critical. And a lot of our kind of emergent themes over the last couple of years has been about the environment. And it talks a lot about people's artistic practice and, how they're working with the environment and the land or loads of other stuff as well. But I think that's a really good place to check out, to kind of just explore other artistic practices or artistic responses to the earth beyond our conversation here.
Can you repeat that, the address?
Yeah, so www.thecriticalfish.co.uk. So it's Hull-based, and I'm biased, but it's a really good magazine article project type thing.
That sounds great. That sounds very helpful. And you're each going to be at Humber EcoFest Conference Day next Saturday, the 11th of November, right?
Yep.
Lovely. So people can come up and just say hello and talk to you more about.
Yeah, please do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Please do.
Sure.
Hopefully I won't have the lurgy by then, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't get you well if you come up and say hello.
I would observe too that all three of you, this might sound really just basic, but I will reflect it back to you that all three of you sound like people who have engaged. You don't sound panicky or closed off. You sound like people who've really grown through practice. And That's why I want to keep pointing people at artists, because you literally embody the process of growing into facing a problem and finding it's not all problem. It's about finding your lives. Also, I think it's funny that at least 2 of you said, I probably sound really weird here, but I have a relationship with nature, with plants. I think you've still got perspective enough to say, oh, I think it's weird that I talk to plants. It's not weird at all, is what I'm going to say. But I'm so grateful to meet each of you this afternoon. Thank you for your time and sharing just a glimpse at your practice, your lives here. I'm looking forward to meeting you in the flesh up in Hull next Saturday. Thank you very much. And it's time to say goodbye to Monika, to Jake, and to Lauren, and to punch out with my very noisy jingle. Hold on, everybody, it's quite noisy. Thank you each.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Timo.
See you soon.
Bye,
Thank you.
Monika.
Bye-bye. Unsee the future. How wonderful was that chat? The 3 of them, each of them, when I've spoken to them, has been so super interesting. And I do find it interesting that they each have such a functional relationship with nature, and it's not in any way, it doesn't sound strange at all to me to hear that now. And I think increasingly that's a theme that we will see more and more, that the very basics of listening, spending time, yes, being permaculture, but just being a person in nature, noticing what the animals are doing, noticing what the plants are doing. It doesn't mean that I don't feel like I don't have an obligation to cut back the bastard climbing rose in the front of my house, because it will take people's eyes out. So I have to make a choice there in my relationship with nature. But you can find out more about each of them on the notes. I'll stick it in the plant below. I will be putting this as an edit out, of course, onto the Unsee the Future RSS feed to listen in your ears. Thank you indeed for spending time with us. And you can find me at all the usual places. But why not start with unseethefuture.com? I have been Timo Peach. And see you at Hull Eco Fest. Do a search for Humber Eco Fest next Saturday. I'm hosting a session in the afternoon. Ciao for now. I've been Timo Peach. And let's see if I can find the basic outro sting here. It was all set up neatly. Ciao for now. See you soon.